As Shabbat begins and Passover ends, I begin my remarks this evening with a story about matzah, the unleavened bread that has sustained and afflicted Jews this last week. Admittedly, this tale, told in the Social Justice Torah commentary by Rabbi Shmuel Yankowitz, is of doubtful historical accuracy, but it is meaningful nonetheless. One spring, before Passover, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter was called to certify the kosher status of a matzah bakery. As he inspected the factory, he observed the conditions thoroughly. He saw that the matzah, the unleavened bread, was made according to the letter of Jewish law. Yet after inspecting every aspect of the factory, Rabbi Salanter refused certification. Why? He refused to certify the factory's products because of the poor treatment of the workers. The women were overworked, their pay was insufficient, and their needs were ignored. Because of his moral compass, he would not allow the consumption of products made unethically. Rabbi Salanter refused to certify the factory's matzah as fit for use on the holiday when Jews tell the story of their ancestors' release from enslavement. The moral of the story is clear. Even for those who have no problem eating pork or shellfish, not to mention bread on Passover, we must concern ourselves with whether our food is kosher, that is, fit to be eaten by ethical people who are concerned about the well-being of God's creation. Today is Earth Day. As we mark this occasion focused on preserving creation in 2022, we are increasingly aware that the future of our planet and of all God's creation is endangered. In the words of the World Wildlife Fund, humans and wild animals face challenges for survival because of climate change. More frequent and intense drought, storms, heat waves, rising sea levels, melting glaciers, and warming oceans can directly harm animals, destroy the places they live, and wreak havoc on people's livelihoods and communities. As climate change worsens, dangerous weather events are becoming more frequent or severe. People in cities and towns around the United States are facing the consequences from heat waves and wildfires to coastal storms and flooding. Last fall, The Guardian reported that a major new study has found that the global production of food is responsible for a third of all planet heating gases emitted by human activity, with the use of animal for meat causing twice the pollution of producing plant-based foods. Raising cows, whether for meat or dairy, presents the most issues, including methane released in cattle waste, massive deforestation to create grazing land, and tremendous drains on the water supply. Other mammals are not far behind. Nearly 40 years ago, for reasons unconnected to the environment, I decided to abstain from eating mammalian meat, and I have kept this practice ever since. My reasoning was and remains based on my understanding of Torah's dietary injunctions. God's initial instruction to humans about what to eat is found in the very first chapter of Genesis as part of the creation story. And God said, "Look, I have given you all the seed-bearing plants on the face of the earth, every tree that has in its seed-bearing fruit. These are yours to eat, and to every land animal, and to every bird of the sky, and to all that creeps on the earth, in which is the breath of life, I give all green vegetation for food." In other words, God prescribes a vegan diet for all living things. Apparently, though, that doesn't work out so well. After the flood, God tells Noah and his children, "Any small animal that is alive shall be food for you. Like green grasses, I give you them all. but flesh whose lifeblood is still in it you may not eat. The medieval commentator Radak explains, that is, you must slaughter the animal before you eat it. Cutting flesh of a living animal is cruel. One may infer that before the flood, humans were so full of lust for meat that they would tear limbs from living animals for food. Perhaps that was the violence that enraged God to the point of sending a flood to destroy all but Noah's family and 2 animals of each non-human species. Radak, though, draws a different conclusion, writing, apparently, Noah was given the right to eat meat in return for having kept the animals alive. From this argument, we may infer that human beings in 2022 only retain the right to eat animal flesh if we, like Noah, keep the animals alive. On this Earth Day, though, we know that human activity is driving animal species to extinction. Arguably, then, contemporary humans have forfeited the right, earned by Noah, to eat meat. As a 20-year-old, my logic was that God prefers veganism, as originally commanded in Genesis, but he made a compromise with Noah, and then a more restrictive arrangement with the children of Israel in the kosher laws, distinguishing between those animals that we may eat and those that must be avoided. I confess that the specifics of the traditional kosher laws have never been meaningful to me. Instead, I have made my compromise between veganism on the one hand and eating all animals on the other. Reasoning that mammals are closest to humans, I chose not to eat their meat, a commitment I have maintained for nearly 4 decades. More recently, as my son Daniel has made me aware of the negative environmental impact of dairy farming, I've switched to plant-based milk and almost never consume dairy. I confess that my own dietary habits have little impact on the future of our planet. Even if our entire congregation, indeed all of the Jewish people, were to stop eating meat, we would not successfully end harmful global climate change. On this Earth Day in 2022, we must sadly acknowledge that great damage has already been done, and the full impact remains to be felt. Still, climate scientists tell us that we can, and we must, slow the warming of our planet. Every step we take does make a difference. 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Tarfon seems to have anticipated our problem when he taught Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor v'lo ata ben chorin lihibatil mimena. You are not required to complete the task, but neither are you permitted to ignore it. We who cannot individually or even collectively arrest global warming nevertheless bear a weighty responsibility to do what we can. Eating to save the planet may be a good start.